Hello and welcome to our conversation with Gökhan Bacık, professor in Czechia. Welcome, Gökhan.
Hello, Yavuz.
Old and New Turkey. As always, we are going to speak about new aspects, new developments, which the latest of them is the AKP Congress. 24th of March, Wednesday, announced in pomp and circumstance by Erdoğan. He had promised a week ago that that would be a manifesto for 2023 centennial of Turkish Republic. So yesterday was an event full of people breaching the COVID rules. That aspect is left aside perhaps for us, but there's a lot of discussion about that. And there were some messages. But in general, let's begin, Gökhan, with the overall view of the Congress. What does it mean? Was that an anticlimax? Was that something new? What does it mean for Turkey?
Well, very briefly, for me, it's a Congress where we observe that Erdoğan is happy with the status quo. So there's nothing new about that. So Erdoğan. It's a manifesto, of course, but from an Islamic perspective. So it's a manifesto of New Turkey, which is now based on new values. Okay, so in that sense, I think it is satisfactory for his followers. So Erdoğan is speaking with domestic and international actors and wants them to recognize Turkey as it is. As it is means now it is the new Turkey. So I am a bit skeptical to see some people surprised that Erdoğan is not talking about some kind of reforms, but this is something about the past. From now on, we cannot expect Erdoğan to come up with a reformist agenda or normalize Turkey. As I said earlier, Erdoğan simply wants domestic actors, international actors. By international actors, I mean market players, I mean Western leaders, including the US president, to recognize Turkey as it is. So Erdoğan is proud of his Turkey. That's why he's giving a lot of messages from a moral perspective, talking about family, challenging European values. So this Congress is...
There was nothing new, though. I mean, many people, critical view holders, talked about mountain giving birth to a mouse, basically. Anticlimax. Nothing new. Repetitions, perhaps, as some said. Wasn't it so?
That is, because I think some people miss a very critical fact about Turkey. Now, Turkey is composed of two great social, let's say, sections. I mean...
Segments.
Yeah, segments. So even they speak Turkish, they are referencing different normative paradigms. So Erdoğan is speaking from an Islamic perspective. And people... it is, I think, a bit strange, people still expecting. So from Erdoğan perspective, it is the Islamic Turkey, it is the new Turkey. So because he is happy of his work, it is time for him to promote that, to repeat that. Okay, this is a kind of idealistic situation from an Islamic perspective. They transform society. They believe they transform also, Turkish state in terms of institutions. I'm just trying to, I think we should try to better understand AKP. Now it's a party state. Our analogies should be from different historical backgrounds, like the Ba'ath Party in Middle East and even the Communist Party in Soviet Russia. Just like those cases, AKP is now in the phase of consolidation, where you no longer wait change. It's the time to consolidate ideology. So we are no longer talking about a party congress in a liberal order. It's a congress in a party system. It's a party system. That's why it is not logical to expect Erdoğan to voice any reformist idea from now on. So he believes that it's the period to consolidate. And there are some pundits within the party who publicly confess this. And one of them says that we have been in a process of preparation, long preparation. It's time to, let's say, institutionalize this new Turkey. So from that perspective, Erdoğan is now speaking within the jargon of Islamism, and accordingly, this is the new Turkey, and that's why we shouldn't be surprised when Erdoğan speaks about human rights. This is human rights from an Islamic perspective. Erdoğan talks about rule of law, and some people are still surprised. I think those people are surprising. It is time to understand Erdoğan talking about rule of law from an Islamic perspective. So the party congress for me is critical, not because we had expected, or we should expect change from Erdoğan. It is the critical congress where we were informed about Erdoğan, his ideas, his vision, how to consolidate Turkey or from his perspective, that is political Islam.
So it is like a threshold in a way. It's a new momentum. It's a breaking point. Is it, this Congress? Critical? Well, what do you mean by critical?
For me, critical means that Erdoğan gives all signals that he will not change the course of Turkish politics. By course, I mean that authoritarianism, or let me say in a different word, Erdoğan's reference is no longer the liberal order as we at least theoretically refer in Turkey. He explained himself from another perspective, and it is time to name this perspective. It is, of course, there is the Nationalist Action Party as the chief ally, but predominantly it is the Erdoğan brand of Islamism, neo-Islamism. So this party congress is critical, not because we have seen some ideas about change, but because Erdoğan has given all signals that from now on he invests in the consolidation of new Turkey. So he's ready, he's poised to try any agenda item, including amending the constitution, opening up new political files about some cultural issues such as family values. Foreign policy, for example, is another typical. So they are all complicated. So it is critical, yes. But as a party congress, where we have seen that the Islamists declare that it is time for us to recognize Turkey as it is. I mean, as an Islamist Turkey, as at least ruled by an Islamist government.
Which should be accepted by external actors.
That's right.
As it is. Yeah. There are two more points which were striking, I think. One, Erdoğan bragging about the number of members of the party. 13.5 million, I think, was the number that he mentioned. The very fact that, bragging about the high number of the membership reminds us of course, Chinese Communist Party or during the Cold War, these members of the Communist parties, now North Korea or something. Even Baathists, I think, also were bragging a lot about counting as a measure of support. What do we make of this thing about what he said?
Yeah, this is again directly about what I have been talking. Now Erdoğan presents AKP as the normal party, as the normalcy. So it's not like Turkish citizens having various alternatives. I mean, of course, there are still parties. We talk about that, part of competitive and hegemonic authoritarianism. But AKP is the normalcy, which means that Erdoğan believes that there is a perfect overlap between Turkish society and AKP. So the ideal model is now all people. So AKP is the national party right now. It is the national choice. Then any other alternative is
state party.
So, that's right, state party. Well, this is a philosophical discussion. In the Turkish history, the majority of scholars name early period Kemalism during CHP, the Kemalist party, as the state party. Some people explain it as the party state. For me, it's not a big deal. I mean, the difference between state party and party state is not something a lot that we should talk about that. But anyway, Erdoğan wants to, let's say, correspond state and the party at the highest level, which means that state is protected and party is protected in the same way. So criticizing party might be dangerous in the Turkish case, as dangerous as criticizing the state. So from that perspective, I try to make some analogies between Turkish political system and some authoritarians, just like we had in Soviet Russia or the Baath Party. So Erdoğan, in his mind, and actually the arc symbol of this new model is the presidency itself, because Erdoğan is the president of Turkish Republic and also head of the AKP. Imagine Erdoğan lost the leadership contest, just speculatively speaking, in the Congress, then then that is something we cannot imagine, okay? So the whole stuff is created according to this model. Then that's why we have Erdoğan is now proclaiming that this is new Turkey. Of course, Erdoğan will negotiate with domestic and international actors, but this is now a new phase where he is going to consolidate, which means it is very unlikely that he will accept a radical change, not only in domestic politics, but also in foreign policy, vis-a-vis relations with the US, for example.
This is the new Turkey, take it or leave it, to put it very simply,
to a large extent.
Another one, soon after the Congress began yesterday, Erdoğan called everyone to stand up, and symbolic sign, Rabia sign, which has a lot of connections with the rift with Egypt. And also it has become sort of a national sign, signifying the new Turkey in many ways. He's still continuing that, although there were some attempts, some olive branch moves to Egypt. And again, he's calling everyone to raise their arms and put this sign together with him as he repeated all this one state, one leader slogan.
I think there are 2 points about that. The first, as you mentioned, it's about the authoritarian reorganization of public space. Public space is indifferent in Turkey. But what I mean by public space is not the Turkish streets, but Turkish TV. Media is also public space. So it is more with Erdoğan. Erdoğan is everywhere. He advises everywhere. So we are now observing the emergence of a new culture of public space where it's normal, people salute the leader. Okay. Maybe it's not like very authoritarian countries, but everything has an origin, and we are observing that birth. It's a nascent in that form. But the second is, well, I think Erdoğan has a lot of freedom between foreign policy and domestic politics. So he just like other populist leaders, he can act in different ways. Even he is in bargain with the Egyptian officials, directly or indirectly. He has such a solid constituency. He can still market the idea of Rabia. So this is what I call as pragmatism, Islamic pragmatism. So on the one hand, we see Erdoğan doing everything against the European values, but on the other hand, we are listening his advisors talking about that Turkey has no option but European Union. But I should ask a question: if a leader comes up with such contradictory policies, I think we should focus not on the leader but the audience. By audience means not only those people in the party Congress, but also European audience, including the leaders. It means that they are also buying that argument, that Erdoğan is repeating that. Otherwise, we shouldn't imagine. Of course, there are some irrational elements in Erdoğan actions, but we cannot imagine him completely irrational. So he's doing so because he believes that it is making it is effective. It's not only about issues with Egypt, for instance. The same we have in terms of European Union, and this is the Turkish tradition to give positive messages to European public before any critical summit, whereas he keeps the same authoritarian track in domestic politics. So Erdoğan doesn't care very much about his let's say party constituency. We should now imagine AKP, Yavuz, not only as a party. It's a social movement heavily dominated by religious fervor, which means that for many people, Erdoğan is no longer a party leader. He's a kind of religious leader. And this is not unique in Turkey. We should remind that Turkish was not only leader of Nationalist Action Party, he was Başbuğ, the leader of Turks. In the same way, Erbakan, the former Islamist leader, was not only the leader of Islamist party, he was saluted as the leader of national opinion. So in the Turkish politics, we have these patterns of imagining leaders, not only official incumbents of the post, but also the spiritual, if I may use that, in the same way Atatürk, for example. When we talk about Atatürk, we never talk about him as the head of Turkish state. It was always more than that. So Erdoğan is now successful. He succeeded to consolidate. From now on, there is a large group among its followers who sees Erdoğan more than as a political leader.
So this Congress, you imply, consolidated what you said, social movement with a lot of religious fervor.
That's right. Nationalistic, religious, Ottomanistic. It's a kind of basket. But this Congress is important because it has provided us the case where we can understand the reorganization of public. That is more or less the same in schools right now, for example. I mean, in schools, in public, in Turkish TVs, then we have this strong idea of leadership, probably the first time since İnönü period. Maybe there could be some other periods, but short term, just after the 1980 coup d'etat, there was once the iconic leadership figure of Kenan Evren, the leader of military junta, but I mean, in general, I think it's now comparable to İnönü period. We have so this is the sorry, this is just like Erdoğan now present himself as the national leader.
Going back to what you just said about Turkey, new Turkey, it is what it is now. Take it or leave it, accept it. I think Erdoğan seems to have established very well in his mind that particularly European Union is ready to buy into that idea, which in a way came as a confirmation today when German Chancellor Merkel gave strong enough indications that it will be accepted as Turkey is now. And although there will be probably some concerns expressed during the summit today, tomorrow, and this expressing concerns also have become a routine in looking and treating Turkey and ignoring the human rights violations, etc. So in a way, Erdoğan seems successful, and this Congress perhaps was another confirmation of that. Two more questions, and then we'll end there, but two very important questions. One is, of course, to an outside eye, what he came up with about civilian, quote-unquote, civilian constitution. A new constitution is needed. The old one is worn out, no longer fits to the new Turkey, and we have to do something about this. And he was pretty strong in his words about this, challenging the opposition. My question is, we don't have no idea about this, what this civilian constitution will be about at the moment. Is the launching of this debate by Erdoğan, should we see civilian constitution as a means or as an end? In other words, as a tool or as an objective per se? What do you think?
Well, I think both. First of all, when we analyze Erdoğan, we see a leader is trying to create suitable conditions for a safe election, if I may say. So there's a target in his mind to have elections at a certain point. And he exactly knows that. And we also know Erdoğan since 2002. One main reason to explain his success, his endless fights in these fields, new constitution, the fight against the army, the cultural fights, so on and so forth. So I think he's trying to keep that dimension alive. Another debate on constitution, which means a lot of debates on family, about Europe redefining secularism. So he wants to keep that dimension alive. He is very much ontologically linked to that cultural aspect of politics. And the debate over constitution is very useful in this regard. Every time in Turkish history, we know that people are very much interested in those discussions, the idea of new constitution. We should imagine the new constitution is a kind of utopia in Turkish public culture. It's been told for decades, but never realized. So it's the typical, let's say, habit of people always interested, just talking my generation, the idea of European Union membership. It never happened, but we were always enthusiastic when there is some people discussion about that. So he's repeating that utopia, new constitution. Then there is a whole generation of people now with the habit of being happy to hear about the new constitution another time and next another time. But for me, as your question emphasized very correctly to the point, he want to use it more as a kind of also instrument. On the one hand, it gives him a lot of opportunity to consolidate his supporters, because a debate on new constitution means a lot of debates on these cultural issues. And another way is this is the way for more change. I mean, if we look from Erdoğan's perspective. So I should say that even I could say that Erdoğan might be not sure what he means by a new constitution. Okay, so
he
this
said
is more
something like it should respond to, what did he say? It should respond to our special circumstances, like whether or not it should overlap with the nation, with millet, and with our individuals.
Yes.
So it means, in a way, if you interpret it freely, that there will be a lot more conservative elements to be injected into that kind of work.
Yavuz, we must be honest about Turkey. I mean, a large part of Turkish society believes that history and international community are not just Turks. So there is a deep feeling among even seculars. Just read for example, their tweets. So Erdoğan, as I said, is not a completely irrational actor. He knows that when he talks about correcting historical mistakes. For instance, just the word dropped by Turkish speaker correcting Montreux. It is not as simple. I mean, nobody knows what Montreux treaty about.
Treaties.
That's right. But I know the Turkish psychology, the mindset. Many people believe that Ottoman Empire collapse was a mistake. It was because of colonial powers. Imperialism. So Erdoğan wants to keep all these reflexes dynamic, which is unfortunately it's just like Nasser. If you go to the late 50s, the
former Egyptian leader.
Yeah, Nasser came up with the ideas, and the interesting point, we should be realistic. Even they are oft repeated, such narratives are always efficient. It's just like religion. If you look carefully, they are repeating itself. It's repeating itself, but every time there's a group of people who are happy. The idea of, for instance, discussions on Kirkuk in Iraq, or the status of Straits, for example, or the idea of a new constitution perfectly fitting to Turkish nation and culture. So even they have been repeated probably since beginning of 20th century, almost more than a century. Still people are very much interested about them. The idea of culture, the idea of cultural revanche. The deep reason that helps Erdoğan is the historical resentment of Turkish society, including the seculars. They believe that from the issues with Armenia, the massacre, the genocide, to another issue, they all believe in consensus that history is not just to Turks. So they are always happy with a leader who promised them to correct that mistakes. So that's why he's always happy to talk about religion. And even very shortly, there are scholarly studies which compare political propaganda during Menderes period in 50s, Demirel period in 60s. There are scholarly studies which provide many similarities of political propaganda techniques in Turkey during 50s of Menderes, 60s Demirel, and also during AKP period. So even in that regard, of course, in a high dosage, but Erdoğan is repeating the same center-right Turkish nationalistic Islamic jargon. So this is boring about Turkey, and this is something that makes unhappy. But we should be honest about that. Maybe like other cultures, Turkish people are usually happy to hear this kind of ideas about correcting historical mistakes, creating a system which perfectly fits their culture. That is mainly because of that deep resentment in Turkish society, which is a consequence of not politics, but education, culture, socialization. So you should imagine Turkey having complex structures of socialization, school, society, repeating those ideas. There were some serious injustices done to us in history. We lost the land, we lost our, so on and so forth. So Erdoğan is now the guy who should use these cultural motives.
On that point, we know that Turkish secular model was always problematic. And this was scarred, this was damaged, this was not very functional, this caused a lot of problems. A lot of people now do wonder whether or not new civilian constitution will enter into that territory and damage it even further and replace it with another model. And a lot of people also asking openly whether or not Khalifat will be introduced through the new civilian constitution work.
This is a
20
very
million,
difficult
$20 million
yeah,
question.
well, normally I would say no. I mean, I would say talking about caliphate in 2021 is a silly idea, but I can't do that, unfortunately. So that's again what I told previously earlier. The psychology of average man in Middle East, the Muslim world. Okay, there are in the air, the ideas in the air. People are happy to hear about that, believing that why Muslims don't have a leader. And it's a very difficult question. Normally I would say no, but on the other hand, we should be very clear on a specific point. Erdoğan is an Islamist. So what he is doing is not something unique in Turkey. Any short perusal of Islamism in the Egyptian context, Malaysian context, is enough to see that Islamism is a pattern. It's a pattern which has typical pillars such as anti-Westernism, Islamization of society, which means Islamization of economy, Islamization of university. So you cannot imagine Erdoğan out of that context, or Erdoğan is not adopting one dimension of it's a holistic idea. So he is and one of them is, for example, is the issue of caliphate. If you read even the classical caliphate before neo-Islamism in late 19th century, and even after the abolishment of caliphate in early 20th century, there were a lot of discussions about the revival of caliphate. And if there is an ideology about Islamism, no matter it is formulated under the title of caliphate or not, there is the idea of unity of Muslims. That's why we have the Organization of Islamic Conference, the idea of Muslim Brotherhood, Ummah. If you read, for instance, the official text of leading Islamist organizations such as Hamas, Muslim Brotherhood, there are a lot of reference to the idea of Muslim unity. So Erdoğan is part of that story. Erdoğan, if you analyze Erdoğan from an Islamic perspective, not a secular perspective, if you subject his speeches to a discourse analysis from an Islamic perspective, there are a lot of motives, which means he speaks as an Islamist. So when he speaks as an Islamist, he's not only leader of Turkey or a party in Turkey, but also speaking with the larger Muslim audience.
In the name of larger audience, yes.
That's right. That's why that is typical of Erdoğan. Probably after every election, he repeats the famous sentence, our victory is the victory of not only Istanbul, but also Bosnia-Herzegovina, but also Baghdad. So this is the Turkish Islamism with the mentality that they speak on behalf of those people. So they position themselves having a responsibility, historical mission. So normally I would say no, but it depends on the context. It depends on the context. Based on what we have seen in Turkey, I wouldn't rule out it completely.
So we should get prepared for not getting surprised. Leave it like that. Okay, one final question, and it's an important one as well. It has to do with the economy. The way Erdoğan, his way of running the economy, his way of running the foreign policy, for those who might be called appeasers or even enablers, the sort of expansionist, expansive, the redentist moves, offensive, let's say, foreign policy is sort of minimized into the interesting for assertive foreign policy. And again, speaking about and commenting about his economic policy, his way of running economy is now introduced by unorthodox economy. What do you think about that? What does he? How can we define that type of economy management?
Yeah, let's first try to understand what is meant by unorthodox economy. This is oft repeated by very leading international experts, even market actors. For example, shall we understand by unorthodox economy in the Turkish context Marxism? It's not. So I think we should name it. It's name to time. Or here is an example. Erdoğan often repeats that interest rate is not the consequences of certain problems, but it is the cause. This is the motto of this unorthodox economy in the Turkish case. Here's my question. What is the philosophical origin that makes Erdoğan speak so? Why he believes in that interest rate is the cause of the problem? That's why he's appointing suitable people to keep the interest rate low. The answer is very clear. It's not Marxism. It's not some sort of experiments from other countries. It's Islamic economy. So I think international pundits
Islamic
should
economy or
realize that
Islamist or Islamic economy?
Islamist economy, I should say. That's right, because it's another intellectual discussion, because there was interest rate even during Abbasids or Ottomans. I mean, but the problem is this is the Islamist interpretation of Islam. So the reason why Erdoğan doesn't believe the standard liberal theory of interest rate is not Marxism. So what is meant unorthodox economy in Turkey is of course Islamic economics from now on. So and it has two typical reflections or consequences. One is justification of economic actions by using Islamic ideas, even they are not referring so. So they never say Islamic, but we all know that the reason why they are angry about interest rate is, of course, about their Islamic background. The second is, again, I humbly suggest international experts, especially market actors, as a bit study how Islamist actors change economy in Malaysia. In other cases, one typical outcome is expansion of state. So if we have Islamist actors, it's inevitable that we are going to have an expanding role of state in Turkey. That's why we have state-sponsored supermarkets probably having more than 10,000 branches, which is unbelievable. Okay, so it is. So how come a chain of supermarket in Turkey has almost maybe more than 10,000 branches? So it is unbelievable. The answer is about that expanding role of state in economy, even sometimes indirectly. So Islamism, if we analyze all cases we have, first has two typical features. The first is to justify economic actions and ideas referencing Islam, even though, as I said, they don't refer directly. The second is expanding role of state. So what has meant unorthodox economy in Turkey is not something unknown. So it is silly to keep that unorthodox economy. We know the orthodox economy. Now the time to name it, it is the Islamist economy. And epistemologically, the reason, to repeat, why Erdoğan believes that interest rate is the source of problem is because of Islamic thought, Islamic thinking about that. That's why Islamist economy invites political actors to prohibit interest rate if it is possible. In the case of Turkey, still it's not possible, so they try to realize that by indirect means of appointing so on and so forth. So the term unorthodox economy, I think, is a bit problematic because it misleads people who want to understand Turkey in a correct way.
I see. Thank you, Gökhan. The internet connection is a bit wobbly, so we should end here. We talked enough about the latest AKP Congress, the messages conveyed by President Erdoğan, President of Turkey and President of the party. And in terms of constitution proposal, in terms of running the economy, there were some interesting subjects that you commented upon. Thank you for your analysis. And let's meet again in a new, old and new Turkey debate or chat, if you will,
Always.
next time. Pleasure. Thank you.